Moving on now, and the Thameslink timetable troubles may be continuing, but nothing stops the delays to ticket price rises. All of us should brace ourselves for Wednesday, when next year's hike is expected to be confirmed at an additional 3.5%. Our political correspondent Simon Harris explains.
People can't actually get on the train.
They've just cancelled everything.
Mommy!
Felt like a sardine, a human sardine.
The Thameslink service has been cancelled.
It's ruining people's lives on a daily basis.
Thameslink apologises.
After a summer like that, Thameslink and Great Northern commuters were never going to be thrilled to pay even more for their journeys.
I'm lucky if I get a seat in the morning.
Absolutely diabolical, particularly for the City Link I've just come off of. The service it's running.
It's delayed half the time, there's cancellation every hour, and still the prices are going up.
I'm a nurse here, so for me, I'm actually at the point where it's probably not worth. I travel in from Kent into London, so it's, I'm getting poorer and poorer year on year.
Economists predict next year's fares increase will be 3.5%. That's based on a July inflation figure due to be announced on Wednesday. Commuter rail fares, including season tickets, are set by the government. Unfortunately for passengers, they're based on an inflation rate which even the Governor of the Bank of England admits has no merit. It's called the Retail Prices Index, or RPI, which in June was 3.4%. The more common measure of inflation, the Consumer Prices Index, or CPI, was 2.3%.
Passengers are travelling on temporary interim timetables, in many cases with worse services than they had before the timetable change. We're calling on the government to have a fares freeze.
The government and train companies argue fares must go up to pay for improvements, more trains, more seats and more reliable timetables. But the Consumer Association, which says passengers no longer trust rail bosses.
What we are seeing is that not only are people complaining, but that train companies aren't listening to them and taking them on board. We've had examples of people being blocked on Twitter for raising a complaint or even to ask questions about their service. We are seeing most passengers dissatisfied with the way train companies are dealing with their complaints.
Thameslink's parent company declined our invitation to talk about fares and said it would introduce more trains when it knows it can do it reliably. Simon Harris, ITV News, Hendon.
Good evening from Westminster, which appears once again to have been the target of a terrorist attack. It happened just up the road from here, shortly after 7:30 this morning. A silver car was driven at speed towards the Houses of Parliament, crashing into a safety barrier, which is just up there on my left-hand side. It narrowly missed the police officers, but hit people walking and cyclists. 3 people were injured, one of whom is still in hospital. A man in his 20s is under arrest tonight, but whilst there was shock here about what happened, there's also a feeling of relief that it wasn't much worse, especially considering what we Londoners witnessed and went through last year. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
A Ford Fiesta is being driven slowly around Parliament Square as an ambulance approaches fast from behind. The Fiesta driver suddenly swerves to the left into the wrong lane, knocking people over, some on foot, some on bikes. The car crosses a pavement and heads for a security lane before finally crashing into a barrier as police jump out of the way.
I saw a car driving at speed, getting definitely more than 40 miles per hour, heading for Parliament. And he's just banged. He's tried to, basically, to me, he's tried to get to barge into the Houses of Parliament. That's what he tried to do.
The Fiesta with its crumpled bonnet has been stopped in its tracks. One of the airbags can clearly be seen through the windscreen. For a few moments, nothing seems to happen. Then all hell breaks loose. These are police armed response teams. Officers run from their 4x4s. Some leap the security barrier as they point their weapons at the driver. Eventually, he's coaxed out and surrounded. In the next few seconds, he's put in handcuffs and then taken away from the car. Now clearly visible again on the left, he's wearing a brown hooded puffer jacket. After a few metres, he's stopped and one of the officers speaks to him. These pictures were filmed by a team from ITV's Good Morning Britain who heard the car crash.
There was smoke, steam coming out of the front of it. But interestingly, all of the police from the parliamentary estate stood by, watching from a distance, not approaching the car. And that was odd. They'd stopped the bus, they were stopping the traffic, no one could get close to it.
Police quickly shut the road and then gradually extended their cordon to take in other streets. Senior officers seemed in little doubt about what they were dealing with.
Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command.
Sorry folks, we can't let anyone through.
Many people couldn't get to work because of the police lockdown. This area is normally heaving with tourists and gridlocked with traffic, but there was an eerie silence as armed officers guarded the crime scene and the investigation got underway. Police tried to question the driver but said he wasn't cooperating. There were no weapons in the car, and as far as detectives can tell, he carried out the attack on his own. Scotland Yard said there was no intelligence to suggest any further threat to Londoners. As the Fiesta was searched and swabbed for evidence, London's mayor said the investigation would follow a well-trodden path.
We've seen in previous investigations, I'm not giving anything away with this one, raids usually take place where this person lives. The police will see whether there are links to other addresses. The police usually look into the mobile devices of somebody who's been arrested, and you'd expect all those sorts of things to happen in this arrest as well.
If this was a terrorist attack, it appears to have lacked sophistication. Parliament is on holiday, and it was too early for the crowds of tourists. London may have had a lucky escape.
Simon, there was an emergency COBRA meeting in Downing Street earlier on, wasn't there? Do you know what came out of that?
Well, this was a meeting that was attended only by officials. It was chaired by the Deputy National Security Advisor, Madeleine Alessandri. And afterwards, Downing Street released a statement from the Prime Minister, where she said the threat to the United Kingdom from terrorism remains severe. I would urge the public to remain vigilant, but also to come together and carry on as normal, just as they did after the sickening attacks in Manchester and London last year. The twisted aim of the extremists is to use violence and terror to divide us. They will never succeed. That statement came from the Prime Minister, who wasn't at the meeting because she's on holiday in Switzerland.
Right, OK, let's move on to the suspect, because we saw a very quick shot of him where somebody had filmed him as he was being arrested. What more do we know about him?
More details from Scotland Yard. He's 29 years old. He's a British citizen, but it's thought he wasn't born in this country. Now, what the police know is from the car number plate that the car was driven down from Birmingham to London last night, arriving in London around about midnight, and it was seen in the early hours in the Tottenham Court Road area before coming to Westminster and Whitehall at around about 6 o'clock. The actual attack, alleged attack, happened at 7:37. So the police are immediately appealing for any information they can get about the movements of that car. Did anyone see it? It's a privately owned car. The individual is still being questioned. We don't yet know whether he started to cooperate with the police. That was the suggestion earlier from Neil Basu, the Assistant Commissioner, that he wasn't cooperating at all. And at this moment in time, the police are also searching some addresses. There's one in Nottingham and two in Birmingham that anti-terrorist branch officers are looking at.
OK, Simon, thanks very much. We'll talk to you again a bit later on in the programme. Welcome back to Westminster, where earlier today a car crashed into barriers outside the Houses of Parliament in what's thought to have been another terror attack on Westminster. The car drove towards the railings quickly, hitting people and cyclists. 3 were injured, 1 is still in hospital. Tonight, the car is still being examined by forensic teams, as you can see here, while a 29-year-old man is being questioned by police. 3 properties in the Midlands are being searched in connection with the investigation. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris has spent all day in Westminster following developments and has joined us down here once again. Simon, how worrying is it that Parliament appears to have been hit again?
Parliament has always been a target for terrorists, going back as far as 1605 when Guy Fawkes tried to blow the place up in the gunpowder plot. In more recent times, the Conservative MP Ery Neve was killed by an IRA car bomb inside the grounds of Parliament in 1979. Then last year we had Keith Palmer, PC Keith Palmer, stabbed to death by Khaled Massoon, again inside the grounds of Parliament. So this will what happened today, inevitably lead to another security review. It always does. But this is already one of the best protected buildings in Britain, with its anti-vehicle measures, its barriers, and with its armed police. So yes, there will be a look again at security. But of course, this centre, home of democracy, will always be a target for terrorists.
Of course. Simon, thanks very much. Exactly why a car was driven at the Houses of Parliament yesterday is still unclear tonight. But the man suspected of being behind the wheel is now facing an attempted murder charge, as well as being accused as terrorism. His name is Salah Khatir, a British national who was a refugee from Sudan and lived in Birmingham. 3 people were injured when the car hit a group of cyclists and then crashed into barriers outside Parliament, raising questions about how secure the heart of our democracy really is. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
This is Salah Khatir as he likes to be seen. The pictures are from his Facebook page. Today, the 29-year-old was still being questioned by police as his background became clearer. He was a member of a Sudanese community football team in Birmingham where he lived.
He's a very kind and quiet and decent person. And you can take 3 words to describe any good person he is. He's very, very generous, very smiley.
Khatir was arrested yesterday after a Ford Fiesta crashed into a security barrier in front of Parliament. He's thought to have driven to London from Birmingham on Monday night.
The picture we're getting is that this young man, he was on his way to the Sudanese embassy. He wanted a visa to go back to Sudan. He was a British national. He had all his paperwork with him. He was in his own car.
The Ford Fiesta has now been taken away by the police. Today there was little evidence of the drama other than the scuffed barrier which Khatir crashed into. The steel barrier might not look much, but yesterday it did the trick, stopping the car in its tracks. But once again, questions are being asked about what more needs to be done to protect Parliament. One suggestion is to turn the road in front of Parliament into a pavement. Traffic would get to use 3 sides of Parliament Square. The 4th side would be for people to walk on.
I've been a long-term advocate for part pedestrianising Parliament Square. I think it's really important that we make parts of London attractive but also safe.
We need to be proportionate, we need to be balanced. We don't want the terrorists to win and to all live in fortresses and never go outside our front door or not be able to visit a wonderful place like Parliament. But sensible measures, of course, have been being taken, and I'm sure in the light of yesterday's attack we'll be reviewing all that again.
This bit here would be pedestrians only.
This bit would probably need to be landscaped.
Adrian Lord advises on pedestrianisation schemes. He thinks tourists especially would appreciate the move.
Believe it or not, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but you would never believe it to look at it. It's full of traffic. Obviously, tourists are stepping out into the road to try and take photographs. It's generally quite chaotic around here as a pedestrian, and people, as you can see, are lined up on quite a narrow footway.
New restrictions to the flow of traffic might not be welcomed by drivers, but the Mayor says he wants to speed up the plan to pedestrianise this part of Westminster.
Simon, let's talk again about the man who was arrested. What more do we know?
Well, when Salah Khatir was arrested yesterday, it was initially on suspicion of preparing an act of terrorism. But Scotland Yard confirmed today that he's now also being questioned about attempted murder after a number of cyclists were injured. Yesterday, the Met's senior anti-terrorism commander, Neil Basu, suggested that Khatir was not cooperating. We asked the Commissioner today whether that had changed, but she declined to say how the interviews were going. A little more has emerged about Khatir's background. He apparently studied accountancy at Coventry University, but left after a year and has more recently been working in a shop.
OK, Simon, thanks very much.